Can you define what it means to be a conservative? On today's edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast, we're going to do just that using what used to be titled 5 C's upon an article that I wrote 8 years ago now. I can't believe it. But now I've broadened that list to include a couple of more C's. And when I say C, I mean the letter C. So we'll define that next. Conservatism defined, up next on the Carl Jackson Show podcast.
Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, so I had to knock the dust off of this old column, but it's one that sticks for the most part in my mind. I've written down a few notes, but I want to make sure that you know what you're fighting for as conservatives, what it means to be a conservative. And I know that people have attempted to define it before. And I've heard some conservatives say you can't necessarily define it. And I disagree with that. I think you can look at what's going on in the culture. And I think there are, 7 C's that I classify as Christ or a Judeo-Christian value system. I don't want to leave out people of faith, but basically I'm a Christian, so I say Christ. But if you believe in, whether you're a Mormon, whether you're a Jew, a Catholic, this is obviously we all believe in biblical values, right? And so that's extremely important. So religious values, Christ for me is the way that I would explain it. The Constitution is the second C. I'm going to get into why that's important. Capitalism, we should all embrace capitalism. Don't be afraid to talk about capitalism, to promote capitalism. It doesn't mean that everyone within a capitalistic system is going to be good, is going to be moral, but we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Capitalism is a good thing, and I believe it's biblical. We'll get into that. The consent of the people, and these two I'm tying together, communication and the consent of the people. And then compassion. I believe that conservatism is compassionate. I don't believe that socialism is compassionate. And then a couple of two that I added. Actually, after talking to Dennis Prager, the first time I think I had him on air, a couple of C's that I hadn't considered, but you need for this day and age, probably even more so. Actually, I know more so than when I first wrote this column. People were a lot more tolerant 8 years ago than they are today. So culture and courage are the last two. Now, so let me start with this. Why is Christ important, or why is our Judeo-Christian value system so important? It's because truth matters, right? It's without God, without a higher being. Truth is just arbitrary. If values, morals, just simply opinions without a higher power, without Christ on the throne. And it's important that we remember that. So this is how people get away from truth. This is why our culture is in such chaos today. I mean, we literally, you have politicians going around trying to give more welfare to people. The Democrats are, the Biden administration is. Now, the Bible says if a man doesn't work, he shouldn't eat. You have an entire Democrat party that says a man shouldn't have to work to eat. He should be able to spend more time at home. And when I say man, I actually mean both men and women. But you know what I'm saying? The left would rather have you on welfare. You have the left that tells you, the Democrat Party, and I believe the left and the Democrat Party are synonymous. They say that, a baby is just a bunch of tissue, a glob of tissue inside of a mother's tummy. So who gets to define right and wrong? If there's no God, then it's simply your truth and my truth. You hear a lot of people saying this today, including Christians that I've heard say your truth and my truth. No, there's no such thing as your truth or my truth. There is only truth. And this is what the left wants to do. They want to distort truth. And if they can distort truth, they can advance their agenda to totally remove God out of society and the culture. And then you will worship at the feet of Uncle Sam. And that's essentially what they want. The elites want the power and control. If you remove God out of society, that's essentially what you do, because you derive morality from somewhere. So those that don't derive their morality from God, they'll look for it in other places, such as the culture, such as government. And this is why truth is so important. You have to have you have to have a foundation for truth. My foundation for truth, my foundation for morals is the Word of God, is the Bible. Does it mean that I'm perfect? No, it just means when I screw up, I can identify why I screwed up. I can identify why my life is messed up, or this area of my life, because I can go back to the absolute, excuse me, truth of the Bible. So that's extremely, extremely important. You have to have a measuring stick for morality. That measuring stick is God and the Bible, or our Judeo-Christian values. Now, the second C. So Christ, the first C, the second C, Constitution. All right, so the Constitution is our referee in the game of freedom. So imagine us on a playing field, if you will, and on this playing field, soccer field, football field, whatever you want to imagine. If anyone has played sports, or if you're familiar with sports, basketball, whatever it may be, if the ball goes out of bounds, the play is over, right? The play is dead. If you play basketball, you step out of bounds, you're out of bounds. All right, the team gets the other ball. Same is true. You hit a foul ball on baseball field, you run out of bounds on football, soccer. Even though soccer has some weird socialist rules, which is why I don't like watching it. But anyway, I'm sure they go out of bounds as well. I know they go out of bounds, so they go out of bounds as well. Well, the Constitution is our referee in the game of freedom. It tells us that we can all play on this field, and we can all play equally on this field. And that's very important. Well, the Constitution is outdated, Carl. I mean, it was written by these old white men, hundreds of years ago. No, it's not outdated. And that is a silly and that's a weak argument. It proves that you haven't read the founders and how much thought they put into the Constitution. As far as slavery is concerned, I mean, slavery was outlawed in some parts of the United States territory in 1787 with the Northwest Ordinance. But that's another topic for another day. These guys thought about freedom seriously, and that is why they wrote the Constitution. The Constitution is not outdated because it deals with human nature. They did a fantastic job, and the same can be true. Same can be said about the Bible. The Bible deals with human nature, regardless of what technological advances have occurred over the centuries. The same can be said about the Constitution. Tyranny through the Constitution, despots are only allowed if we allow them to take, or tyranny is only allowed in the United States if we allowed it, we the people, to take a foothold. There's no other constitution in the world that does that. We, the people, are control of the politicians. Unfortunately, there's so much government dependency that people, the free people, rely on the government in order to sustain their lifestyles. And when you do that, that isn't freeing. That's not what they meant that isn't what they wanted in the Constitution. But a lot of politicians have been able to flip that around to enslave some of you guys. But nonetheless, the Constitution is freeing. The Constitution talks about equal rights, not extra rights. For all of you social justice warriors, you wokesters out there. When Martin Luther King Jr. Talked about equal rights, you have the left now and the Democrat Party talking about equity. Equity is a crime, in my opinion, oftentimes, because it oftentimes involves robbing other people. But equality is a different thing. Equality comes from above. It's God's creation. God wants all of us to be equal. Enshrined in the Constitution is the ministry or the truth of equality. What Martin Luther King Jr. fought for, what Frederick Douglass fought for, or listen, just give us what you said you're going to give us, everyone else. That's enshrined in the Constitution. We have that today. The social justice warriors, the Ibram X. Kendis of the world, the Nicole Hannah-Jones of the world want you to think otherwise, and they are just simply lying to you. Blacks have equality under the law today. Do blacks commit more crime and thereby more blacks go to jail? Yes. This doesn't mean that there's inequality under the law. You have the opportunity to go out, make more money, hire a better attorney, and actually stay married so you have a 2-income household. That would be great within the black community. All right, capitalism. Socialism isn't natural. I'm sorry. No one grows up, with their son or daughter and saying, oh my God, I can't wait. I can't wait till my son or daughter get on welfare, right? No one says that. People want their kids to do better than them in life, or at least we did. The vast majority of the population wants their children to do better in life. Socialism is not better than capitalism. First off, socialism is theft, and it's the epitome of greed and envy. I get so sick of these people, including Christians who use the Bible out of context to say, well, socialism is a God thing. No, it isn't. Matthew 25 talks about it's a parable of the talents where God gives one person 1 talent, another 2, another 5, and he expects a return on his investment. Capitalism is totally biblical. Socialism is not. It isn't compassionate when you tell other people to work, take their money, and then give it to someone else. You're a thief. You're a thief. I'm sorry. That's the epitome of greed and of greed and envy. Hey, you know what? I want to share with somebody. So let me take what you have. Let me take what you earned and let me give it to someone else, and I get the pat on the back. No, I'm sorry. Socialism is completely selfish. Socialism is a bit of virtue signaling when it comes to people that aren't in government. Nothing more than a way to try to feel good about yourself when you yourself are not that generous. Listen, poverty is relative. I'm sorry. When it comes to the United States of America, the poorest 5% in America are amongst the richest in the entire world. We have it very good here. I know, relative speaking, when you look at other Americans that have more than you, you may feel like there's a different story, but that just isn't the case. All right, let's move on. The consent of the people. Or communication. If you have the wrong information, you draw the wrong conclusions. This is why censorship is so bad. This is why the social media censorship is so doggone bad, because it affects the consent of the people. It messes with the consent of the people. The government derives their power from the consent of the people. But if they're getting the wrong information from government, people will be fooled into giving their government more power. And this is exactly what's happening with the left. Look at the J6 select committee and the committee hearings. You have the media not telling the truth about Hunter Biden. You have the media exaggerating cases about J6. And now these people are in trouble. These people have been, kept as political prisoners, but you have people on the left. You have the Democrat Party many on the left that have gotten the wrong information, and they say they're drawing the wrong conclusions. And now they're saying to these protesters should be locked up, where these protesters no longer basically they're wiping away their powers that they have to make sure that that they're in control of the government. They don't even realize what they're doing to themselves. They're flipping the script on themselves. The government derives their power from the consent of the people. And now the people are sicking the government on other people that disagree with them. And you know what? That's going to backfire, because eventually the government is going to be sicked on you. All right. That's another one. So you have Christ, Constitution, you have capitalism, communication, and consent of the people. I kind of tie hand in hand, or at least I tried. Now, compassion is the other C. All right. I hate the term compassionate conservative. I hate that George W. Bush would use compassionate conservative as if being a conservative isn't compassionate. I would say conservatism is far more compassionate than liberalism, even. Liberalism is kind of ignorant bliss. All right, do what you want, blah, blah, blah. Here's what conservatism does. Conservatism looks at Uncle Sam. There's a difference. So you look, metaphorically speaking, of course. So conservatism looks at Uncle Sam, or Uncle Sam looks at a conservative and says, you're nothing without me. Well, conservative is a compassionate. Conservatism realized, no, Uncle Sam, you're nothing without me. See, conservatism recognizes the value of the individual. Everyone is special. Everyone is important. You don't have to belong to a group. You don't have to be black. You don't have to be white. You don't have to be gay. You don't have to be this. You are a person. You are a individual that's created in the image of God, and we respect that and we love that about you. We don't like when you form people groups in order to censor us, right? So conservatism is compassionate because conservatives care about the individual. Conservatives care about individual life. That's why we care about baby from the womb to the tomb. All right. We value individuals extremely. We encourage them to take advantage of their God-given gifts. Instead of sucking off the teat of the government, T-E-E-T, instead of sucking off the teat of the government, we care enough about people to say, you know what? You are going to value your life. You're going to love your life. You're going to appreciate your life more if you go after the things that God has called you to go for. That's compassionate because we value the individual. We love the individual. We respect the individual. We respect the gifts that God has given every individual. It doesn't mean every individual doesn't have to be a preacher. Every individual doesn't have to be a teacher. Every individual doesn't have to be a scientist, an engineer, a mathematician, into technology or whatever. It doesn't matter if you're a plumber. It doesn't matter if you clean toilets. It doesn't matter if you cut grass. It doesn't matter if you're a janitor. It doesn't matter what you are. Conservatism says you're a valuable individual. You're a valuable person. I don't want to know about your sex life, right? I value you as a person. I value you. We're compassionate. Liberals are not. Leftists are not. You have to think like them in order to be liked. Conservatism doesn't say that. It just says, let's all think, let's all follow the Constitution. Let's play within the same guidelines. Let's play by the same rule book. And you're free to do whatever you want to do. It's much more. But now, there's a couple of other things that came to mind. After speaking to Dennis Prager, and obviously we can all see it now, culture. I think as conservatism means shaping the culture. We have a duty and an obligation not to, how do I put this? Basically, I think to stand against the tide. Just because you're the lone voice crying in the wilderness doesn't mean you're wrong. And I think conservatives and conservatism shapes culture. This is going to sound counterintuitive, but I think the left wants Judeo-Christian values. You think about it. Think of how worthless the KKK is without black people. Think of how worthless. Think of how worthless the Black Panthers, Black Lives Matter movement are, or irrelevant they are without whites. I think people need and people want, as much as they want to bash people of faith, as much as they want to bash them, I think people inherently really want these people around because eventually they're going to need God, right? And eventually something is going to happen in their life and they're going to want to go another direction. And if that place, that church place, that church community, that faith community doesn't exist, where do they go? So as much as they bash it, I think they need it. This is why it's so important for conservatives to stand strong on cultural issues. Traditional marriage is important. Traditional marriage. Listen, I think there's only one type of marriage, and that's between a man and a woman. That's my personal take. All right. It doesn't mean that I hate people that I don't. That's my personal take. So you got to stand up. You got to be willing to stand up against the culture, and it makes a huge difference. Look at Disney. I spoke about this yesterday, but look at Disney. Just consider that. Just standing strong with truth, and you can shape the culture. So conservatives today need to be cultural warriors, and it doesn't require you to figure out all this stuff. It's I tweeted the other day that old school simply means common sense now. It really does. It means you're normal and you have common sense. So stand against the culture by being normal, by not being afraid to stand up for what you believe in, by not being afraid to fight for what you believe in. The left is willing to fight for what they believe in. They're willing to destroy your lives with cancel culture if they have to. So just be willing to stand up against the culture by standing up for truth, by standing up for what's real. All right? We know that we know that life is important. We know that freedom of speech is important. We know that socialism is dangerous. It's not good. We know that illegal immigration is a bad thing. We know that our military shouldn't be social justice warriors. We know that fossil fuels and natural gas are extremely important for the lifeblood of our economy. Stand up for truth. Stand up against the culture. And you're going to make a difference. You know, when you have a friend, a neighbor, a family member that's, they're just crazy left wingers. They say that you don't even have to get in arguments or debates with them. It's just like, okay, well, that's fine that you believe that. This is what I believe. And you don't have to go by. I like going back and forth with people sometimes too much, right? And it gets me in trouble. But you don't have to. Just stand firm in what you believe. If you stand firm in what you believe, you're going to shape the culture because people around you, you're going to be a light in darkness. All right. And you got to have courage. Obviously, standing up against the culture requires courage. I think people, conservatives, it requires courage to be a conservative in today's environment. And you know what? It's good for us. So this isn't a new fight. It's a new fight for us, but this isn't a new fight. This fights like this against the culture, against evil, against darkness have been happening since the beginning of man. Now is our time. Now is your time, right? So just continue to stand and be strong and take faith and be courageous. Be courageous. Don't let people force you out of what you believe in, force you away from your worldviews, force you to cave and acquiesce to the political left that absolutely have no meaning and no purpose in life except to try to be mean and hateful to people that disagree with them. So don't acquiesce to that. Be strong. Be courageous. You can do it. That's part of conservatism. Christ, Judeo-Christian value system, objective truth. We've gone over all the C's now. Constitution, referee in the game of freedom, capitalism, socialism isn't natural. No one grows up or no one wants their kid to grow up embracing the welfare culture. No one wants to do it. Consent of the people and the communication. If you have the wrong information, you draw the wrong conclusions, and the government will pull a jujitsu move on you where you're actually empowering the government rather than being the person with the power over the government. Again, conservatism is compassionate. We value the worth of every single individual. You don't have to belong to a people group. You can talk to us on a one-on-one basis, and we can love you. We might disagree on some issues. That's fine, but we can love you. We can love you for you. For the person you are, not who you have sex with. That's a very very tiny fraction of who a person is. All right, so conservatism is just more compassionate. We encourage the God-given gifts in people so that they can bloom, so that they can blossom on this world and in this life. All right, and then culture. We got to stand up against the culture, and some of the ways in which we stand up against the culture is just being normal and not falling for the nonsense. No, men can't be women, and no, women can't be men. I'm sorry, and no, I don't know what a pansexual is, and standing up to people like Disney. We got to get in the we got to stand up to the culture. We can't buy into what Hollywood is doing. Hollywood used to put out a lot of good stuff, not so much anymore. So just stand against the culture and just realize all of these things. To implement all of these things, it's going to take a bit of courage. So Christ, Constitution, capitalism, communication, and consent of the people, or along with consent of the people, compassion, culture, courage. Take courage. All right, guys, until next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you. I'm going to encourage you to please follow me on everywhere podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, Rumble. I'm really trying to build that Rumble account, so if you would please follow us on Rumble, like and share it in anywhere podcasts are found. Salem Podcast Network is also a great place to find us. So I hope I've made or defined conservatism, for God's sakes, a little better for you. So Christ, Constitution, capitalism, communication, consent of the people, compassion, culture, courage. There you go again. Till next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.